Hello everyone, welcome to Dhandeep. In this session, we are going to discuss one more question from Ethics Paper 2023. On the screen, you have this question from 2023 paper, that is, differentiate between moral intuition and moral reasoning with suitable examples. Two terms have been provided, that is moral intuition and another is moral reasoning, and we have to differentiate between these two terms and we also have to provide suitable examples. So there is a very standard format with which you can write answer for this particular question. The format for your question can be to have, let us say, a table. Fine. In table, you will write here moral intuition and moral reasoning, and then you will differentiate between two. This can be your approach, or there can be another approach where you will directly start with introduction, and in introduction, you will define moral intuition and moral reasoning, and after that you will explain. I'll first explain what moral intuition is. Okay, so I'll provide some details on moral intuition and then I'll provide example, and similarly I'll repeat for moral reasoning as well. Now this is, since it is a straightforward question which you have to write, there not going to be many complexities while writing answer for this particular question. The only problem is to define these particular terms well, fine, or to understand these particular terms well and to provide suitable example. Now when I am saying moral intuition, let us see first what introduction can be written. Again, I have already told you what can be the introduction in this particular part. So I'll straightforward go and define these terms, right? So when it comes to ethics, try one thing, that be as simple and straight as possible, because already this particular paper is a bit complicated paper. A lot of terms are being used, and when you try to include a lot of elements, a lot of fancy things, what happens is you might end up losing the essence of this particular part or essence of ethics in this particular paper, right? So that is why I prefer to have most of the answers written very straight, unlike other GS paper. In other GS paper, you would do some you would write some facts, you will give some context, you may come up with some example, right? So that is fine for GS paper 1, 2 and 3, but when it comes to GS4, better way is to go straight. So what I'm doing, I'm going very straight. In introduction, I'll define both of the terms. I'll first in one line define moral intuition, that is a spontaneous judgment. Okay, so it's a spontaneous judgment which is evoked instantaneously, the way a sense perception is when one is confronted with a particular case. So if you are facing a particular situation and spontaneously out of your intuition you tend to act in a moral way, that is moral intuition, right? So when moral intuition is there, you are not taking time, you are not thinking a lot, right? There are not many things you are taking into account, fine. It is your spontaneous reaction to the given situation, but in a good way, right? So when we are saying a spontaneous reaction, moral intuition is such a spontaneous reaction which is a good reaction. It may happen that you are just seeing a situation where some, so let's say some domestic violence cases there, right? And what happens is a lot of folks, they would not try to interfere, many will call police. That is very appropriate way to go forward. But you as a person of conscience, what you will do, you will directly go and try to resolve that matter, at least that there is no violence. So if you're doing that kind of act without taking too much of a time in thinking ki what is going to happen next and what is not going to happen next, so that will be your moral intuition, because it is coming from your gut feeling. Let us say it is coming from your gut feeling or it is coming from your intuition, so that you are taking an action. So that is my moral intuition, something I have like explained also, and I have also provided you with a definition. In later part, what I am going to do, I'll write for, let us say, moral reasoning. Okay, in introduction I'll define moral reasoning. So moral reasoning is what? when you are taking morally correct decision based on critical thinking or analysis, that will be my moral reasoning. Again, I have given you that example of domestic violence. You see domestic violence, right? So maybe one person is directly jumping into that situation and trying to pacify the situation, so that maybe a woman who is subjected to domestic violence, she is not getting further harmed, right? So that is my first case of moral intuition. Now there is another case of moral reasoning, if I have to give, will be a person who is contacting authorities, bringing them in and trying to resolve this particular situation. That will be a case of moral reasoning. Now what the second person did, right? So that person also intended good, right? But what he did is he came up with some analysis, because he knows maybe he might have thought that right now jumping into the situation may or may not solve the problem, or he might have thought that authorities are the best people to resolve such conflict. So that kind of decision is being taken that by that particular person. Maybe most of the other person are just being a bystander, right? And they are not doing anything. But there are two cases I have given you, one of moral intuition, another of moral reasoning. When it is moral intuition, you are just acting spontaneously and jumping into the situation, right, in a good way. And when it is moral reasoning, you are thinking it through, you are taking a right course of action, right, but based on your analysis, based on your reasoning. Okay, and that is not a spontaneous reaction, right? So both of the acts are good, right? You cannot say that the person who executed moral reasoning is not doing his job, or the person who has executed moral intuition has not done his job. Both have done their job, both have done it in a good way, right? But approach of both of them is very, very different. Fine. So that is what the difference between moral reasoning and moral intuition is. Now with the very same example, you can explain both of the conditions, right? Or you can give different examples also. Let's say there can be one more example in this particular part. uh, uh, it may be most of the times what we have a situation when there is a case of accident, and when there is accident, people neither call authorities nor they help the person who is affected in that accident, right? But there are some good Samaritans who will act based on their intuition spontaneously and help out the people who are affected. And then there again will be people will call ambulance, will call police, and try to bring down the situation in a good way, right? So I have given you a few examples. You can add your more examples in this particular part, but the difference between these particular thing will remain in a very simple way, that moral intuition is more spontaneous and coming from your own feeling, right? But when it comes to moral reasoning, it is more a thought approach. Now if we have to differentiate further between moral intuition and moral reasoning, let us understand the process from where moral intuition is coming and moral reasoning is coming. So when it comes to moral intuition is more about or more out of your experience. Moral intuition is more out of your culture you are living in, the values you have practiced, right? So let us say, like the person I have gave you in the first case, who jumped into that domestic violence case and tried to pacify the situation. So that person must have not seen such type of violence, or that person must have been brought up in such a way that he was told, or the values he carried, they will in a way ki we have to help everyone in the best possible way, right? And we have to try to solve problems as early as possible. If that kind of values have been imbibed with that particular person, so obviously he will jump into the situation. Let us take the process of moral reasoning. The person who is taking a course of moral reasoning is a very he would be an educated person, so his moral values are more coming out of education, or the knowledge, or the information that particular person has, right? So both are intending good, but again, process was different, their actions were different, and the background from which these actions or these processes were coming, they were totally different. So in this way you can differentiate between moral intuition and moral reasoning. And in conclusion, let us say what can we conclude with? A very generic conclusion we can talk about here, that both of the qualities are very important in our day-to-day life. So now let us take these values in our life as a civil servant. We can say, as a public servant, we need both of the values. There will be situations where we have to act out of moral intuition, right? And obviously in most of the cases we will be acting out of moral reasoning as a civil servant. So that is something again you need to highlight here. So with this, we will conclude and see you in next session.